Shkoyach. All right, Shavuot, say good morning. Let's begin. Today's daf is Lamed. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Our shir this morning is dedicated by Saeed and Simahakin in honor of the birth of their newest grandson, Baruch Hashem, to their children, David and Yael. Mazel tov, v'shavizoch lachniso b'riso sh'al malvinu bizmano. Mazel tov, mazel tov. And our shir of Kusharim, of course, this month are dedicated by Leah Sol and the Zuchas of Rafu Shlema for our daughter Ilana Bas Esther. We hope that the merit of our Talmud Torah she will enjoy a complete and enduring refuah. All right, Tabose, with that, let's begin. We are picking today's daf is Lamed 30. We really have a lot to do today. Get too carried away with the Piaget's. There's not enough time. We're going to start at 5:30, I think. All right, so who's in? Okay, good. So we're picking up Chav Tes Amud Beis. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 lines up from the bottom. So let's remember again, we're dealing with the fascinating and riveting machlokes between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan about Yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'adsof or Eina l'shchita mitchila v'adsof. We'll say, how do we categorize, or halachically, how do we categorize? What's the framework of shchita? The shchita process that begins with the first incision on the neck and ends with the cutting of the robe of the two simanim. Or do we say shchita really represents the result, the culmination of the process? So we'll say ultimately, again, we've begun to see some of these nafkaminas. And we ended off yesterday in the middle of a discussion of paraduma, with which we are going to pick up today. Rava, ikashli. Here's my kasha. Kashli. Leman damar eina l'shchita elabasof. According to the opinion who says that the process of shchita only is at the end. And others will say that shchita represents a process that culminates when the cutting of the simanim is complete. Liflog b'achshara depara. Then I will say ultimately again, let's make the nafkamina case. In a case, instead of where the paraduma is invalid, but where the paraduma is valid. How so? So the Gemara says, Kigon de shachtua betray gavri. Let's say, for example, two people shechted the paraduma together. Watch this. The gavra kamala matzama. So we'll say, again, remember, if you hold ein l'shchita el labasof, so ultimately, again, the first guy does not become tameh because his initial act is not considered to be halachically not halachically valid, but it's not considered to be shchita because ein l'shchita el labasof the gavra basar matama, and the second guy who essentially finishes the shchita ultimately again would become tameh. Omer Rav Yosef, Trei Gavri Bechad Zivcha Kamrit. Are you talking about two people shechting the same korban? Bar minei dahi. So don't bring up that case. Why not? Ditanina Tizbach Shelo Yushnaim Shochtin Zevach Echad. Also, from the word Tizbach, we learn that two people cannot go ahead and shecht one korban. We'll say so. We're gonna discuss this halacha in greater depth. Tizbachuhu Shelo Yihei Echad Shochet Shnei Zvachim. And I will say from Tizbachuhu we learned that what? One person should not simultaneously shecht two karbanos. So we had this drasha of Tizbachehu yesterday. Sorry, top of Hamid. Aval Chachamim Omrim, Beis Shochten Zevach Echad. The Chacham say that halacha l'maisa, two people can't shecht one korban, and we'll discuss this in greater depth. Ula Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Nami Liflog. Supposed to even according to Rabbi Shimon who says that two people can't shecht one korban. I can still give you a case of two people by paraduma. What's the case? Here we go. Kigon the shachat chad gavra b'shnei sudarim. We'll listen to this. Remember, when it comes to paraduma, anyone who's participating in the shechita of the para, of that matter, any process of the para, so the person and his clothing become tummy. So watch this. I said in the case of one person with two hats, right? So one person literally again with two turbans. How so, we'll say the sudar kama lo matama. So we'll say, watch this. Let's say again he's in the middle of the shechita. Mamish, he's got a wardrobe team, and in the middle of the shechita he's got a turban change going on. So he starts the shechita with one turban, ends the shechita with a different turban. If you hold that's what ein l'shchita el labasof, the sudar kama lo matama. Then we'll say if that's the case, the first turban would not become tamei. Bless you. V'sudar basra mitame, and the second turban would become tamei. I will say why? Because remember again, it's basof. We're determining. Remember again, All of this would be, this is all according to the shita of Eina l'shchita el lebasof. So the Gemara says, Ella bepisul de para kamairi, bachshar lo kamairi. So which the Gemara says, no. The way we set up the case is we're only talking about invalid cases of para aduma. We're not talking about cases of para aduma where things go well. Okay. Master Avidi Baravin. Ubemoed lishmo potter, shelo lishmo chayev. So we'll say, here we come to another very interesting case. Look at Rashi. Ubemoed lishmo potter. Rashi says, "B'shochet haPesach ala chametz kais." Look at this Rashi. Talking about now, we'll say the halacha is that you are not permitted to shecht the Karban Pesach when there is the presence of chametz. And if you shecht the Karban Pesach when you are in possession of chametz, ultimately, again, that is a lav d'oraisa. That is a biblical prohibition. So Rashi said, look at that Rashi. B'moed l'shmo pater, b'shochet ha'pesach ha'chametz kai, perak tamid nishchat, u'marbinan hasam, l'shar zvachim, sheshachtan b'pesach ha'lachametz. So we'll say, the Gemara in Pesachim explains that the prohibition to go ahead and shecht a karban while you are in the possession of chametz is not just a din by Karban Pesach, but in fact, it's a din by any Karban on Pesach. And Rashi continues and he says, Shelo kela mishum lo tishchot al chametz. V'kam Rab Shimon shashochet Pesach b'soch moed. So let's listen to this case. What happens if a person shechts a Karban Pesach during Yom Tiv? Now, what does that mean, shecht a Karban Pesach during Yom Tiv? So what does that mean? Listen to this. Kigon, sha'avad ba'ar ba'asar. We'll say, here's the case. I separated out a Karban Pesach on Erev Yom Tov, on the 14th of Nisan. And then what happens? I lose the animal. I lose my Karban Pesach. And as a result, I offer up another replacement animal instead of my lost Karban Pesach. Then what happens? I then find the first animal, the first original Karban Pesach during Pesach itself. And then what happens? V'shachto l'shmo. So, and then I shecht it l'shmo. We'll say l'shmo means what? I have in mind to offer it as a Karban Pesach on Pesach itself. Al chametz. And I will say the problem is that I'm also, unfortunately, in possession of chametz. So what's the halacha? Pater. Du zavach posel du lochazi shelo bizmano lishmo. So we'll say, so that's the case over here. So ubemoed, so we'll say, here's the case. One more time. I set aside an animal as a Karban Pesach. Then what happens? Unfortunately, I lose it. I separate out another replacement animal. I offer up the replacement animal. Good, Shalom Yisrael. Then what happens? Chalamayit comes. I find my original Karban Pesach. Then what happens? I offer it up as a Karban Pesach. I have it on. I will say, obviously, that's problematic. There's no such thing as a Karban Pesach during Pesach. But that's what I did. I offered it up as a Karban Pesach on Pesach. And to make things worse, I'm in possession of chametz. So I would say, so the shaila is, have I violated the prohibition of offering up karbanos while in the possession of chametz or not? So the Gemara says, Ravidi Ba'avin says, Ubemoed lishmo, if I offer up this lost and now found Karban Pesach for the sake of Karban Pesach, and I'm in possession of chametz, I am pater. I'm pater. We'll say why? Because offering up a Karban Pesach during Pesach is a Karban pasal. It's an invalid Karban. Because it's an invalid Karban, therefore what? I am not chayiv for offering up a Karban while being in the possession of chametz. Shelo lishmo chayiv. But if I offer up that lost and now found Karban Pesach, and I don't offer it up the Karban Pesach, rather I offer it up shelo lishmo. But in this context, shelo lishmo means what? As a shlamim, then I am chayiv. I'm chayiv for sacrificing, for offering up a Karban during Pesach while in the possession of chametz. And we asked about this. The reason ultimately I'm bichayiv because I explicitly offered it up shelo lishmo, not for the sake of Karban Pesach. Hastama pater. We'll say, but if I offered it up without any explicit intention, it would appear that it would have the status of a Karban Pesach, and I would be pater for offering it up while in the possession of chametz. Va'amai pater. Why would that be so? Pesach b'shari mos hashana shlamimhu. We'll say ultimately again, Pesach during the rest of the year has the status of a shlamim. So even if I offer up shelo l'shmo, would not the default be that's what? That is a shlamim, and therefore I should be chayiv ultimately for offering it up while in the possession of chametz. To which the Gemara says, Shma mina Pesach b'shari mos hashana ba'yakira. We'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that even a Karban Pesach during the rest of the year needs an active identity uprooting, right? That when you offer it up, Rabbi say, it's not just enough to offer it up stam, but you have to explicitly offer it up not l'shem Pesach, i.e. l'shem shlamim. So the Gemara says, Nizr kami pi chabura. So also Rabbi Chia says, Nizr kami pi chabura means the group, the chabura, offered the following explanation. V'amru, hacham ayaskin. And I will say, what's the case here? Kigon shayu bailim t'mei mesim, the nitchin lepesach sheni, distam l'shmo kai. I will say, watch this. What's the case? The case over here is where the people who lost the original Karban Pesach were Tmei Mesim. We'll say because they're Tmei Mesim, so what happened? Right? They couldn't offer the Pesach anyway, which means that when they find the Pesach on Chalamayid, so therefore what we'll say, this Pesach is really fit for when? For Pesach Sheni. So it is a fit Karban Pesach. And therefore, again, Halacha Lamais, it's in this kind of case where in order to uproot its Pesach identity, you need an active Akira. The Stam L'Shmokai, V'haihu Debai Akira, Ha'acher Lo Bai Akira. And it's only this type of Karban Abosai that requires an active uprooting, identity uprooting. But Stam, another Karban Abosai, there would be the Halacha, that ultimately, again, if you offer it up during Chalamayid, where it can no longer be offered up as an active Karban Pesach, by default, the Karban Pesach identity is uprooted, and it is now a shlamim. So we'll say, so what does it have to do with any of us? With what we're learning? Here we go. If Saleh mitchilas shchita. So we'll say, if you hold that the process of shchita ultimately, again, is a continuum. It begins with the initial cutting of the animal, right, and continues until when? Until the cutting of the two simanim. Then I will say, this case makes sense. Why? If Saleh mitchilas shchita, because we will say, as soon as you begin the beginning of that shchita, then what? Then halacha lamaisa, it's no longer fit as a Karban Pesach. So it makes sense. We'll say, if you hold that shchita only occurs or really only culminates at the end, kevan deshachet beporta. So I'm sorry. So I will say, what we said before makes sense if you hold that what? That halacha lamaisa, however, if you hold then kevan deshachet beporta, as soon as you begin to shecht a little bit, what happens? Pesach is automatically excluded from Karban Pesach. Idach ki kashachet shlamim kashachet, and therefore I will say ultimately the rest of your shechting is by definition what? Is by definition going to be a shlamim. So I will say if you hold yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'atsof, then the moment you shecht it l'shem Pesach, it's puzzle. It's puzzle. If you hold ina l'shchita ela l'basof, you could say that what? Once you begin to shecht it a little bit, then what? Rabbi say can no longer be offered up as a Karban Pesach because it's chalamayid. So what does it become if it's not a Karban Pesach? It could become a shlamim, and therefore can be kosher. So Amalei Abaye mihidi itchli mi Pesach midmei Pesach mi itchit, which Abaye says 1 second. Even if you want to say that the Karban is set aside, ultimately again from being a Karban Pesach. Then what? Then halacha lemaisa midmei Pesach, from the value of the Pesach, it's not said. Before we go on, just take a quick look at Rashi in the intermediate lines in Rashi. If sele betchilas shchita, distami havi lePesach, the tchilas shchita nami pasa. So remember again, if you hold yeshna l'shchita betchila v'atzov, the shchita is a continuum. So in this case, I will say where I lost my Karban Pesach, I find it on Pesach. I begin to shecht it l'shem Pesach. I will say that initial cut in the animal, in the neck of the animal, even before I did anything, that initial shchita is halachically significant. What do I have in mind? What is it for? Karban Pesach. That animal is puzzle. And if I have chametz, and even if I have chametz, I'm not going to be chayiv for that. Masha'inkein, if you hold that eina l'shchita ela lebasof, Rabbi say that means what? That means at the time that I begin the shchita, so I'm not yet doing a halachically valid act. Which means what, Rabbi say? That by the time Rashi says, Eli ihamet lo paslad gimar shchita, hagamar shchita, lav pesach havi, tekevan deshachet beporta, v'lo ichsi l'shehavi lepesach sheni, itchi lepesach. What I say? Because in that case, the moment you begin the shchita, and it's not fit to be a Pesach, it becomes something else. What's this something else it becomes in this particular context? Is shlamim. And if it becomes a shlamim, it should be good. To which the Gemara says 1 second. Even though you can't use this as a Karban Pesach, it still has a Pesach value. It has what we call Demei Pesach. So look at the first line in Rashi, Mid Demei Pesach, Ra'ui hu linkar, kolten gimash chita. Listen to this. As soon as you begin to shacht the animal, as long as the animal is not yet shachted, what's the halacha? The halacha is you can redeem it. The animal could go for Chullin, and the money could go for what? The money could go ultimately again for future carbon Pesach. So therefore, I will say because this animal still has what we'll call Pesach financial sanctity, therefore again you could still be said that you're shachting it l'shem Pesach, even if you hold eino l'shchita ela basof v'chitem abai ha'amad v'ha'aracha. Maybe you'll say, "Oh, 1 second, in order to do that, the animal needs assessment and evaluation." But now we learn we learned explicitly that even if you shechted 2 of the simanim or a rov of 2 of the simanim, as long as the animal is still convulsing, it is considered to be alive for all purposes. So we'll say we're going to discuss that in greater depth, but for our purposes, what that means is that halacha l'maisa, as long as the animal is still convulsing, it could even be redeemed. It could even be redeemed and have its sanctity transferred onto money. So in this case over here, if you go ahead and even if you hold eino l'shchita ela l'basof, so really I will say that animal still has some type of Pesach identity. Why? Because even at the end of the shchita, even once the shchita is complete, as long as that animal is still convulsing, technically speaking, what can you do? You can redeem it, right? Redeem it, use that money for a future carbon Pesach, and the animal becomes Chullin. So because that, I will say you have the ability to passel that animal even if you hold eino l'shchita ela l'basof. Right, so I will say these cases really are secondary to the primary issue at hand, which is, so what is the halacha? Do we hold yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'atzof or eina l'shchita mitchila v'atzof? I will say, so do we say that shchita is only a process which culminates after you cut the 2 simanim, or is shchita the continuum process, ultimately where what? Where it begins with the initial, call it cut or incision, and ends with the cutting of the simanim. I will say, now remember again, we've been focusing on a couple of carbonic cases, but I just want to point out there are some real nafkamina cases. I'll give you the Rambam. Listen to this. This is the halacha. This is Hilchos Shchita, Daled Halacha Yud Gimel. Listen to this nafkamina case. Hischil akum lishchot miut simanim. V'gamar Yisrael. Oh, hischil Yisrael v'gamar akum psula. So let's listen to this case. I'll give you where this comes out. I don't know if it comes out. It could come up. Let's say the akum. You have a non-Jew begin the shchita, and the Yisrael, finish the shchita. So we'll say, so what's the status of such a shchita like that? If you hold eino l'shchita ela l'basof, so really we're going to look at what? Who finishes it? If you hold yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'atzof, so then the potential involvement of someone else could pass the shchita. So the Rambam says, yeshna l'shchitasa mitchila v'atzof. We'll say the halacha is, we look at the act of shchita as a continuum. That's halacha l'maisa. Yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'atzof, it's a continuum, and therefore again, halacha l'maisa, it begins with the first incision, and ultimately again ends with the chomesh rabosai. So for example, perhaps the greatest nafkamina case, remember the case yesterday? Where you begin to shecht even miyot simanim, just a little bit of the animal outside of the base of mikdash, but then the real shechita occurs inside. So remember again, that was an afkamina case. We now see that case would invalidate the carbon, because the shechita is a continuum that begins from the initial incision to the cutting of the 2 simanim. And therefore, any invalidation in any part of that shechita invalidates the shechita as a whole. Incredible. We'll say weiter. Let's listen to this next case. What happens if you shecht in 2 or 3 places? So let's say, so what does this mean? So remember again, in the classic case of shechita, what's happening over here? 1 person, 1 cut, Shalom Yisrael. Now, we'll say what's happening over here is you're cutting in 2 or 3 places. Rashi says over here, 3rd to last line in Rashi, 3 lines up. B'shnayim u'shlosh makomos shechatach kan v'chazar v'hischil lishchot lemata u'lemal. So once I begin a cut at one place, then I begin a cut in another place, and I begin another cut. So at the end of the day, I will say mission is accomplished, right? Because again, I've cut the rov of the simin, but the shaila is what's the status of that type of shchita? So it says the Gemara, shchita so kshera. So we'll say the Gemara says, or the Yehuda says the name of Rav, the shchita is good. The shchita is good. Ki amisa kamei de Shmuel, Amar li ba'inon shchita mefaras v'leka. So we'll say, so when I said this over in front of Shmuel, Shmuel said it's not good. Why? Because also you need what's called a shchita mefaras. So shchita mefaras, Rashi says over here is megula, discernible, vinikeres, and recognizable. Tahainu b'makom echad. So Shmuel posits that you need what's called the shchita mifaras, which means a clear and discernible shchita, which is defined ultimately again as one cut in one place. Multiple cuts in multiple locations, Shmuel will say, is not good. Even Reish Lakish holds that you need a shchita mifaras, a clearly recognizable and discernible shchita, which also means a shchita in one place. From where do we know that shchita has to be mefaras, clear and discernible, one cut in one place? Shneimar chetz shachot l'shonam mirma daber. So we'll say quotes over here, interesting enough, from the pasuk from Yirmiyahu. The pasuk says, literally again, their tongue slaughtered like an arrow, mirma diber, from speaking slander. So we'll say, so what we're picking up over here is the use of the lashon of an arrow with shchita. We'll say, how does an arrow work? One straight cut. One straight cut. So the fact that the Navi is comparing again shchita to the arrow tells us shchita has to be one straight cut. So the Gemara says, massive Rabbi Lazar. So Rabbi Lazar is a kasha. Shnayim ochsin besakin. Oh, right? Beis ochsin besakin. Right? Two people holding onto a knife. V'shochatin. And they are shechting. We'll say even if one person, now what this sounds like is one person is above, one person is below. We'll see what this means in just a moment, right? We'll see what this means in just a moment. So even if one's above, one's below, ultimately again the shechita is kasha. So we'll say, so what's interesting over here is as follows. Rashi points out over here that we initially assume that beis ochzin besakin means two people holding two knives. One is holding on the top, one is holding on the bottom, and they are simultaneously going ahead and shechting. So what do we say? Shchita so kshera. So we'll say, so now what is that? That's not a shchita beforas. And yet it seems to be that we're saying what? That halacha l'maisa, the shchita is good. Amai, v'aleka shchita beforas. We'll say there is no clear and discernible shchita in one particular location. No. The Mishnah is talking about one knife, two people. So what happens over here? One knife, two people. White people holding the knife on either side and doing the shechita like that. That's when the shechita is going to be okay. But perhaps two knives, Rabbosai, would not be good. Perhaps two knives would not be good. So we'll say, so that's which we learned before. We'll say we learned that even when two people are shechting, we're not concerned that they'll end up making it a treifa. So we'll say, what you have to be concerned with two people is what? Each one may rely on the other to cut rove of the siman. Right? So that makes sense. If we're talking about a case of two knives and two people, they're both doing their shechita thing, and we might have thought it might have to be concerned that maybe neither will cut the robe of the siman. Why? Because each one thinks the other is cutting the robe of the siman. Which the Gemara says, no, you don't have to about Shema Yitrafu. See Armit B'Shlam Shnei Sakinu Shnei B'nei Adam Shapir. So I'll say, ultimately, again, if you say we're talking about a case of two people with two knives, then I understand the lashon of the Raisa. So now the thing, what would I have thought? I might have thought that they are relying on one another. And I will say, what ends up happening? Neither will end up cutting the rope. Why? Because I will say, like most times when a group of people are relying on one another to get something done, what usually happens, right? Everyone assumes the other is going to do the work. Therefore, again, I will say, Kamash Molan, I'm not concerned about that in this case. Rabbi say, if you tell me we're talking about a case of one knife with two people, then the concern, if it's two people and one knife, so I'll say the concern therefore is no longer that they won't cut the rope of the siman. I'll say, what's the potential concern? It's a concern of drasa. Right? I will say, what's drasa? We're going to talk about this in greater depth. The halacha is shechita must be done through cutting and not through pressing. So you could take a knife and press it through the simanim. That's a psul by shechita. When you have two people holding one knife, Rabbi Osai, the concern is what? drasa, right? The concern ultimately is just as a result of two people, they may end up pressing it down as opposed to cutting. So we'll say if we're really dealing with two people, one knife, then the Brisa should have said we're not concerned for drasa. So Amar Rabbi Abin Tani in Choshishin Shema Yidrasu Zalza. So we'll say, so indeed again, Rabbi Abin says, you're right, change the girsa. The girsa should actually read, we are not concerned that halacha lemaisa, they may come to do drasa one with the other. So we'll say, so we're left off right now, again, we haven't finished yet, but just understand where we're holding. We're focusing on this very interesting case about what happens if you shecht in 2 or 3 different places. Right? So it will say, which gets to the fundamental machlokus about shechita. Is it that we just require the row of the simanim to be cut, and as long as the row of the simanim are cut, we're good to go? Or do you need what's called a shechita mifaras? Or I will say, ultimately, again, do I need a clear and discernible and recognizable shechita, which is only accomplished in one cut, in one place? So that's the machlokas where we are currently dealing with now. So Masiv Rabbi Abin. So we'll say Rabbi Abin raised another kasha. Masiv Rabbi Abin. Shachat es haveshet lemata v'esakana lemalo. Oh, es haveshet lemalo v'esakana lemata shchita sukshera. But listen to this interesting case. What happens if you shecht? Remember again, veshet is the esophagus, kana is the trachea. So let's say you cut the veshet on top and the kana on the bottom, or the veshet on the top and the kana on the bottom. So we'll say what's happening in this case. See, as opposed to just, let's say, a classic shechita, which also would be what? I'm sorry, straight through, right? What's happening over here is I'm cutting one siman on one level and another siman at a different level. So that's talacha. Shchita sukshera. Both say the halacha shchita is good. Amai. Why is that? Haleka shchita mifaras. Both say ultimately again you don't have a clear and discernible shchita. So both say the assumption that the Gemara is making over here is that what? I'm going to cut the veshet, and then in a separate act of cutting, I'm going to cut the kana. So I say, so what's the problem? Both simanim are cut. The problem I'm encountering is what? The problem I'm encountering is that it's not what's called a shchita mifaras. So what do I do? So the Gemara says, and yet the Gemara says, now what do I do? But the Gemara says, yet it's kosher. So it appears based on this that what? You do not require shchita mefaras. So the Gemara says, who most of all, who mefarchli? He answers it, no. Shchita asui ka kulmus. Rabbi say, this is a shchita that is like a kulmus. Rabbi say, kulmus literally means like a quill or a reed. We'll say what it means is ba'alachsom. We'll say the image you have to have in mind is, as opposed to a shchita like this, straight across, you're doing shchita at a slant. So we'll say if you're doing shechita at a slant, which by the way, you could imagine could very easily happen in a shechita, depending on how the animal is positioned. The shochet, it's not cutting straight across like this; he's cutting up or he's cutting down. So in a case like that, what ends up happening is you cut one of the simanim higher and one of the other simanim lower, but that's still called what? Shechita mifaras. That's still, see, the idea of shechita mifaras is what? Is one cut. See, even if that one cut is at a slant, the Gemara is saying we're okay with that. That's fine. It doesn't have to be level. It could be a slant, but the idea is that it should ultimately, again, be one clear cut. Ha'utura, the ishchat b'shnayim u'shlosha makomos. Let's listen to this. There was an ox. Right, there was a cow that was shechted in 2 or 3 different places. So we'll say it was shechted, and it was shechted, again, as we said before, by 2 or 3 different cuts, in 2 or 3 different places, right? Al Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, Shakal Mishipuri Shufri. So this is what happens. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta came and took from the nicest pieces of meat, which will say is another way of saying shechita was kosher, right? It was good. He took himself a couple of nice steaks. Rabbi Zera says to him, Rabbi, so we'll say, here's what's interesting. There's a machlokes Rashi tells us here about how exactly to read this line. So Rabbi Zera says to Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi, you taught us that the Mishnah is talking about 2 people and 2 knives. Look at Rashi. Mishnah Seinu, right? Mishnah Seinu diktani shtaim ochsen besakin afilu b'shnei sakin kamachsher. So ultimately, Rabbi, you write this. So according to Rashi's version, Rabbi Zera is saying, "Oh, Rabbi, the fact that you're taking of this meat reinforces the way you taught us the Mishnah. Because what did you tell us, the Mishnah? That even if you have 2 or 3 people shechting at 2 or 3 different places on the same animal, the shechita is good. And now again, you've backed up your teaching with what? With what? With the fact that you're taking the steaks from the animal. Tosa says something a little bit different. Tosa says, "Limaratanu Rabbeinu tap Tosa Laman days. Limaratanu Rabbeinu Mishasin Mishnei Sekem Mishnei Bnei Adam. Mashu Shekin Halacha the B'shnai Mishloshim Makomos Shchita So Kshera. Ubahag Garis Limaratanu Rabbeinu Mishasin B'Sakin Echad Ubeis Bnei Adam Kilomar Veheich Ata Ochel." So we'll say, according to Tosus is saying Rabbi Zera was telling Rabbi Yitzchak, Rebbe, this is not what you taught us, right? You taught us that shechita in 2 or 3 places by 2 or 3 people is not good. And now what? You're taking from the steaks of the animals. So Rabbi Zera is asking a kasha on his Rebbe. And the Bosai says Tosus, so it's quite possible that Rabbi Yitzchak ultimately went ahead and retracted his original opinion, and then asking that halacha l'maisa shechita in 2 or 3 places is good. Fine. I'm Rabbi Yitzchak, which by the way is the halacha, that although ideally we like the shechita mefaras, we like one straight, clearly discernible cut. If you end up shechting the animal in 2 or 3 different places, as long as it's rov of the siman and the shechita will be good. Again, not ideal. We like shechita mefaras, but shechita bebeis, but shnayim megillah makomos is going to be kosher. Listen to this. So now, the Gemara is quoting a halacha that has nothing to do with this context, because we're going to get into the psul of chalada. So we'll say chalada ultimately literally means borrowing. Borrowing in this case means, as in a normal case of shechita, you're going ahead and taking the knife from the outside of the animal, cutting in. Borrowing means you somehow get the knife in between the simanim and cut the simanim from the inside of the animal. So that's why it's called borrowing, right? You get into the animal and kind of cut the simanim from the inside. So the Gemara is going to devote significant time to this definition and this psul. Right now, the Gemara is bringing it in very secondarily or tangentially, so we'll focus on it a bit superficially. So, we'll say if you borrow the knife in between, we'll say what this means is you somehow get the knife into the animal's neck. We'll discuss in greater depth later on how you do this. In between the 2 simanim, and you go ahead and what? And you go ahead and you cut the siman from the inside, right? Bein siman l'siman upasku psula. Ultimately, again, the animal, the shechita is pasul. Tachas ha'ar. Rabbi say if you somehow borrow the knife in the flesh of the animal, not between the simanim, so you end up cutting the simanim again without necessarily cutting the external flesh. Kshera. Ultimately, again, it's good. Fine, I will say, what's the chiddush over here? Today we already learned this once. We'll say, if you went ahead and you borrowed the knife, right? Ultimately, again, tachas hasheni, underneath the second siman, upaska, when you cut the siman from the inside. Rabbi Yeshaviv omer nevela, Rabbi Akiva omer treifa. So Rabbi Yeshaviv says it's a nevela, Rabbi Akiva says it's treifa. So both say, see, this is interesting. So they have machlokes as to what the status of the animal is, but everyone agrees that's what? It's not kosher, right? So maybe it's an avela, maybe it's a treifa, but one thing is clear, which is it's not kosher. So what's the chiddush over here? We already learned this. So say ultimately again, if from the Mishnah I would have thought this is only true when milamata lemala. Ultimately again, when you are going, we'll say from what? When you're going from when you're cutting in it, you did chalada, you borrowed the knife, and you're cutting from in an upward fashion, going from the lower point to the higher point. Because we'll say that is not the normative way you shecht. But we'll say if you borrowed the knife in a way where you're shechting the simanim again, going in a downward fashion, then the ka'avet kiderech shchita imashapir dami. What Rabbi say that is more like a normative shchita cut. Then maybe I would say that indeed that would be kosher. Kamashmalan tachasa ark shera. Therefore, say again, the Mishnah. Therefore, again, the Brisa teaches me that anytime you're borrowing the knife, whether you're cutting from top down or from bottom up, either way, again, it is going to be possible. So, I'm sorry. Just lost the place. Kamashmalan tachasa. I'm sorry. Tachas if you go ahead and you borrow the knife underneath the flesh, but not in between this simanim. So beirav amri tachasar eni yodea. So I'll say, so in the yeshiva of Rav, they said we don't know the status of a shechita if one borrows the knife underneath the flesh, but not in between the simanim. So like I said, we're going to see all of these cases in greater depth later on. Ibailuhu. The Beirav to Amri Tachas or Enio. Yes, what's that? The Gemara asks, according to Beirav, who says that if you borrow the knife underneath the flesh, we're not sure about the status of such a shechita or not. Is that called chalada? Tachas matlis mahu. We'll say, listen to this. Let's say the animal has a cloth tied around its neck, and you, quote unquote, borrow the knife underneath the cloth. So also what this means is, instead of removing the cloth to do the shechita, you put the knife underneath the cloth and you do the shechita like that. Mahu. Ultimately, again, what is the status of such a shechita like that? Do we say that that's called chalada? Because it will say again, essentially, the idea that shechita has to be done on an exposed surface. And any time you go ahead and you put the knife under a surface, even if it's something external to the animal, like the cloth tied around the neck of the animal, that's still chalada. Furthermore, again, tachas semer mesubach mao. Let's say what happens if, for example, the animal has wool, right? That is knotted wool by the neck of the animal. So instead of just shaving that hair off, right? Cutting that hair off, you place your knife underneath that wool and cut like that. Is that called chalada or not? Mao. To which the Gemara says, Teku. Furthermore, Papa asks, what happens if you did chalada, you did this borrowing, but what? You only went ahead and cut miot simanim, only some of the simanim like that, but you didn't do the whole shechita like that. What's the status of the shechita? Again, to which the Gemara says, Teku. Now Rashi points out over here by Teku, Rashi says, Ulechumra. So again, in these cases of Teku, where ultimately, again, we don't have a resolution, you have to go lechumra and ultimately say the shechita is possible. Beautiful. Here we go, Vaiter. We'll say Mishnah. This is great. Someone shechts two animals at once. So we'll say, so remember again, what's the case over here? You line up two animals, mamish, one next to the other, and with one swipe of the knife, you are shechting two animals. What's the halacha? Kshera. Ultimately, again, the shechita will be good. That's case number one. Next, shnaim ochtin sakin v'shochtin. So we'll say two people are holding onto a knife, and ultimately, again, they're shechting. In this case, they're shechting one animal. So what's the halacha? Afilu echad l'mala ve'echad l'mata shechita sukshera. We'll say, remember again, we already, it's a little bit anticlimactic because we the havamina is this would be a case of what? Two people in with two knives. We already saw before that this is really a case of two people with one knife. Even if I'll say it appears if they're standing more like at an angle, right? Ultimately, again, shchita sukshera, the shchita will be good. Hit this as harosh b'basachas psula. Well, this is actually an interesting case. If during shchita you end up lopping off the head, right, decapitating the animal in one fell swoop, the shechita is kosher. Now both say, the shechita is pasul. Now both say, now what's the logic over here? You see, the Mishnah is working under the assumption that in order to decapitate the animal in one fell swoop, what are you doing? You're chopping, you're not cutting. So you must remember again, shechita has to be molech umevi. It has to be like a sawing, cutting-like motion. It cannot be chopping. So the assumption over here is if you're getting off the head of the animal in one fell swoop like that, then halacha lemaisa, that is not cutting, that is going to be chopping, and therefore will be possible. Haya shochet, if you were cutting, you were doing shechita, and again, either because of the sharpness of the knife or your incredible shechita dexterity, you are lopping off the head, decapitating the animal in one cut. So I'll say, so what's the halacha? Im yesh sakin malitzav kshira. So we'll say in that case, and we'll discuss this more in the Mishnah. If the knife, Rabbi say, see, what we're concerned about over here is as follows. If you did the shechita and decapitated the animal in one cut, so we'll say essentially what we need is to make sure that you actually cut and didn't chop. How do we know that? What's the length of the blade? If the length of the blade, Rabbi say, is at least the length of the neck, then we know that with one fell swoop, with one fell cut of the blade, you cut through the entire width of the neck, and therefore it's possible if it's exceptionally sharp that it went through the entire neck and decapitated the animal. So we'll say, so again, in order for that to be okay, the length of the blade has to correspond ultimately again to the entire width of the neck. This guy's like this. If he's shechting two animals and he decapitated, not only shechted, but he decapitated two animals at once, then what? Then yesh besakin malay tzavar echad kshera. Then I'm going to say ultimately again, same thing. And again, we'll discuss this more in the Gemara. But halacha l'maisa again, we'll have to see what this means, because it sounds like what the Mishnah is saying is, even if you're shechting two animals, as long as the blade has the length of one neck, and even if you end up decapitating the animal, the shechita will still be good. So we're going to further define this in the Gemara. When is this true? So we'll say the shaila only comes up in cases where the shechita is being accomplished ultimately again in one motion, either what we call a holacha or a havah, right? You're only moving the blade in one direction. So we'll say that's where, when you're shechting the animal and all you needed was a movement of a blade in one direction, that's when we have a concern of what? Of chopping and not cutting. So therefore we say as long as the blade has a minimum length of the width of the neck, we're confident that in fact you cut and you did not chop. However, again, listen to this, Rabbi say. However, avalim holich vehevi. Rabbi say, if you are moving the knife back and forth, then afilu kosher. Then Rabbi say, there is no minimum size for the blade. This is actually very interesting. When we speak about a shear for the blade, that is only if you're accomplishing shechita in one fell swoop, right? In one cut. That's when you need the minimum size of the blade is the width of the neck of the animal. But if the way you shech is to go back and forth, and you're going back and forth repeatedly, Rabbi say, then what? Then the halacha is afilu koshu. Then whatever size of the blade you have is totally fine. Afilu bi'izemel, even Rabbi say in izemel, we'll discuss it like a plane, right? Or a chisel, right? Afilu bi'izemel, afilu bi'izemel ksher. We'll say even a kli, a sharp object of the smallest size is fine. In other words, that the size of the blade only matters when you're cutting ultimately in one swoop. But if you're molich umevi, if you're going back and forth, then I will say, then the size of the blade does not matter. Then Allah say even a very small blade is fine because we're confident that you're going to accomplish a proper shechita through holacha and tovah. Good. So let's just go one more line. So we'll say ultimately again, from where do we know? Now from where do we know what? So we'll say, so the beginning of the Mishnah, when speaking about two people shechting, as we saw before, the issue or the concern is one of drasa, is one ultimately again of pressing. So from where do we know that I will say ultimately again, you can't press the knife into the neck of the animal, and that if you do so, it'll be possible. Shmuel de Kamakra, Chetz Shachot Lashonam Mirma Diber. So we'll say, as we saw before, that halacha l'maisa, the pasuk says, compares shechita to the arrow. Just as the arrow cuts, or I should say kills with cutting, so to shechita has to kill ultimately again with cutting and not with pressing. Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel, v'shachat, ein v'shachat ela u'mashach. So we'll say, Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel says, the pasuk says v'shachat, and what is shachat? Shachat, we'll say, means mashach. Ultimately again, to go ahead and to push and to pull. V'cheinu omer zav shachut. We'll say, and ultimately, as it says, zav shachut, which I will say means literally again drawn out or pulled out gold. Really, what it means is hammered out gold. So v'cheinu v'omer chetz shachut l'shana mirma diber. My v'omer. So why does he quote the second pasuk? V'chitema zav shachut shenitva kichut. Who mostly maybe you'll say that zav shachut doesn't mean again hammered gold, but rather it means golden thread. Tashma chetz shachot l'shanim. So we'll say, so essentially, if you don't like the first pasuk, there's always the second pasuk of chetz shachot l'shanim, which teaches me that what? That halacha l'maisa again. Halacha l'maisa, just as the chetz, the arrow kills ultimately with cutting, so to shechita has to be done with cutting. We'll say, take a look at Rashi just a moment. Zav shachot mashach shu rach u'moshkin osakin osin starf in the choshes chutin shotzmein chutim. So listen to this. So zav shachut means hammered gold. And we'll say, what do you do when you make hammered gold? You take something that is larger and thicker, and you hammer it out to thinner. The imagery there is that the shechita also has to be something that is longer and thinner, i.e. a prolonged act of cutting. All right, we'll stop over here. We'll pick up bottom of Lamed and Meretz Hashem tomorrow.